Good morning, Packer fans. I'm Narad Chapik, host of Porn Packers podcast. Thank you for being here and thank you for checking out this video. Also, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Whenever you're watching this video, that's one thing that I really have to consider when you post something online, and people can view it anytime of the day, but I am here to talk about, it's 2020. We had the 2019 years behind us. We're all kind of recalling our memories of the 2019 year and something that changed in Green Bay. There's a lot of changes that took place for the Green Bay Packers in 2019. So I wanted to recap what happened throughout this last year, some players that emerged looking back at our records, some of it, maybe we got a new coach that was thrown in there, and then we also want to look forward to the future because we are in the playoffs. We have ourselves a lovely bye week right now, but it won't be very long until playoff football is very fresh in the land of Green Bay. Without further ado, guys, it is time to pour ourselves another Packers podcast. So once again, thank you guys for tuning in. I am filming this in the very, very early hours of Sunday morning because when you're a father and a husband and a working citizen of the United States of America, you find yourself with very limited time to go out there and post and run a YouTube channel. But I want to thank all my dedicated subscribers, all 889 of you at the current time of this recording. I do appreciate it, and it's because of you guys that I put on my Packer shirt and my Packer hat, and I film a little bit of content for you. So there was some playoff football that took place yesterday. Buffalo Bills, Houston Texans. That was a great game, went into overtime. Houston snuck that one out, and after a 16-0 lead by the Buffalo Bills, they absolutely collapsed, and that was a little bit of a shocker and just a really fascinating and fun game to watch. On the flip side of that, the Patriots, finally, the dynasty perhaps could be over there in New England. It's a brand new decade, and it seems like the old ways of the Tens have gone behind us to the side. Patriots fall to the Titans, and it was really a great thing to watch. A lot of uncertainty between Tom Brady and his future, Bill Belichick and his future. Who knows what's going to happen over there in New England? But regardless, some very fascinating football that took place last night, and it sets up a beautiful day ahead of us when we look at the matchup between the Saints and the Vikings, and then the Eagles and the Seahawks. There's a lot of good football to be played. Luckily, we don't have to worry, and that's one really great feeling about all this, is that we're just on to the next round already. We'll see you next weekend. That is just an awesome feeling. We're at home. Those are all just wonderful things that the Packers have afforded themselves to do. But let's turn back the clock a little bit, shall we? It was almost exactly 1 year ago to the day that the Packers hired their first new head coach in over a decade with the hiring of Matt LaFleur. He was hired January 8th, 2019. Like I said, almost exactly 1 year to the date. And he has just had a phenomenal impact and a very successful first season as the head coach, not only in his career, but for the Green Bay Packers. His 13 wins this season is the record for the franchise for the Packers when it comes to most wins by a rookie. Actually, hitting 11 would have been the record, but he added 2 more to the top of that. It's the most wins since 2011, and that's coming off of a season where we only were able to put together 6 wins last year, so we doubled our amount of wins year over year. NFC North champions for the first time since 2016. It's the first time Green Bay has had a first-round bye since 2014, only the third time in the last decade. But then outside of just LaFleur and the head coaching and his abilities, he brought in a whole new idea, or as far as an offensive scheme. And it's boiled down to that the Packers don't have to rely on Aaron Rodgers, and I'm not going to get into the whole what happened to Aaron Rodgers or has he lost something, because I think a lot of it boils down to the fact that we are not relying on the pass. We have a running game. And you look at year over year, last year we only ran the ball 34% of the time back in 2018. This year we ran the ball 42%, and I don't think it's always going to be 50-50. I do think that when you have 12 under center, that you still need to throw the ball here and there or quite occasionally, or more than running the ball. But just seeing this whole new offensive scheme kind of unfold, definitely it's a work in progress. It's very raw. It's something that I see there's going to be a lot of building and potential for next year. Give him another offseason, give Rodgers another year to acclimate to it. but you have to factor that into many of the changes that happened in 2019. And then we talk about all the new players we add to our roster. We have the free agent additions of Preston Smith. He signed a 4-year, $52 million contract. Za'Darius Smith, 4 years, $66 million. Adrian Amos, 4 years, $36 million. And Billy Turner, 4 years, $28 million. Aaron Rodgers is currently signed through the 2023 season. All 4 of these guys will be part of the roster throughout Rodgers' remaining contract, and all 4 will have impacts on our roster because all 4 of these guys have made impacts on the Packers roster this season. And like I said, despite what all the talking heads on ESPN, NFL Network, Fox Sports, wherever you guys decide to get your football news from, the Packers find themselves with a first-round bye, with the ability to host a home game, at least one home game. They're tied for the best record in the NFC at 13-3. They're only a game behind the best record in the NFL, which is 14-2 by the Baltimore Ravens. And although they have won ugly by many people's standards, this is a team that has found ways to win in a multitude of ways. And I want to break that down for you. Let's have a little bit of a recap of the season. So there's games where we played with a lead that we were able to gut out and win. You look at week 2 against the Vikings, we jumped out to a 21-0 lead very early on in that game. We hung on to win that game 21-16. Week 9, we jumped out to a 14-0 lead against the Kansas City Chiefs. And although Kansas City went on a 17-0 run to lead at halftime, Rodgers throws for 3 touchdowns, 305 yards. Jones has 159 receiving yards off of 7 receptions and 2 touchdowns to add on to that. But then that offense was able to run off the remaining 5 minutes and 4 seconds of the clock in the fourth quarter. Green Bay goes on to win that game 31-24. There are games that we played from behind. You look at week 6 and week 17, both these matchups against Detroit. In week 6, we fell down 13-0 very early on in that game. In week 17, we fell down 17-3 at halftime. Both these games end with a game-winning kick by Mason Crosby, and it was just a team effort in both those matchups for people to kind of jump out and emerge. I'll get to the emerging players in the very near future. There's games we gutted it out where it wasn't easy. We didn't jump out to an early lead by any stretch of the imagination, or we didn't fall behind. You look at week 1 against Chicago, it was a defensive struggle. These teams were still definitely trying to figure out who they were at that point. We go on to win 10-3, and then week 10 in Carolina, that was a different Carolina Panthers team. I swear to God, that was a much better Carolina Panthers team than what finished the season. But we led 14-10 heading into halftime, and then with a 24-16 lead, we had our last 2 offensive possessions ended in punts. Carolina had 18 plays, or excuse me, they had an 18-play, 88-yard series to end the game with 2 minutes left. And good old Preston Smith stopped McCaffrey on the 1-yard line, and we were able to win that game as time expired. So those are 2 games where we gutted it out. The Green Bay Packers put it together and then got themselves a victory. And then our favorite games that we love to talk about are the games where it all clicked, right? So I got 3 of these. There's week 5 against Dallas. We led 31-3 with 3 minutes left to go in the third quarter. Aaron Jones had his wonderful 4-touchdown game, 107 yards. Defense had 3 interceptions on Dak Prescott. Week 7 in Oakland, season high 42 points for our offense is what they were able to put up on the board. Aaron Rodgers had his perfect passer rating day. For the first time in his career, he threw 5 touchdowns, and MVS even made a splash in the bucket for probably the only time of the entire season. He had 2 receptions for 133 yards and 1 touchdown. And then probably the last and most impressive, and the one that still is so recent in my memory where everything clicked, was the Vikings game just a couple weeks ago in week 16. Defense held the Vikings to... Quiet down, Siri. Defense held Vikings to 7 total first downs. Aaron Jones had 154 yards rushing on the ground. Adams had 116 yards and 13 receptions. Kevin King had an interception. We won 23-10. We turned over the ball 3 times in that first half, but we still got it all together. I think that was a fantastic outing. That was a game where we left that, and I felt really high and confident as far as how the Packers would do in the playoffs. So as much as Coach LaFleur and us as fans would love to see more of those consistently dominant games throughout the year, Green Bay has set themselves up in a multitude of ways to win just from the experience throughout these 16 games in the regular season. I think it's a big reason why you have interviews from Rodgers and you have interviews from Za'Darius Smith, and they are so confident that this is a team that can go deep in the playoffs, that can win in the playoffs, because they have found many ways to win throughout the regular season. They weren't always pretty. as the saying goes, they're ugly, but you can win ugly all the way to the Super Bowl, and Rodgers would be perfectly happy with that. Quite frankly, there's 2 wins to go until the Super Bowl. Who cares if they are pretty anymore? We just got to get a W. We have to live to play another day. And none of those ups and downs throughout the regular season really will matter from this point forward because it's playoff football time. Yes, there's things I'd love to see, things that I'd love to see corrected, and just an overall, like I said, we want to be that dominant force, but we've had flashy teams in the past, and it doesn't necessarily indicate what we can expect or what we need to see out of this Green Bay team to make a Super Bowl run and possibly bring that Lombardi Trophy back to Green Bay. Another topic that I did want to cover was the topic of players that have emerged this season. So these are ones that maybe flew a little bit under the radar, and actually outside of one of these players, these guys kind of appeared out of thin air. So let's get started. So you have my number, no particular order. You look at Allen Lazard. This is a guy that got originally cut from the 53-man roster. He was he emerged as Green Bay's number 2 wide receiver, but what a lot of people forget is that Lazard was riding the bench until week 6. Week 5. The first 4 games he did not play at all, and then in week 5 he came in off the bench and performed in that Detroit Lions game. He gave a jolt to the Packers offense. He helped mount a comeback against Detroit on that Monday Night Football game. He finished with 4 receptions, 65 yards, and had that beautiful over-the-shoulder touchdown. Even not after playing the first 5 weeks of the season, Lazard still finished with 477 yards, which is it's second on the team for receiving yards, 4th in receptions, and he tied 3rd with 3 touchdowns on the roster. So the biggest sticking point is that with Lazard, he's definitely earned Rodgers' trust. He's become that 3rd down option that Rodgers has felt more and more comfortable throwing to versus just having to throw to Adams constantly. And he, like I said, he kind of came out of thin air. This is like a really talented receiver, maybe not the traditional number 2 wide receiver that you'd see on a lot of rosters, but he's emerged. He's someone that definitely gives us a lot of hope as we head into the playoffs, and someone that really, like I said, was cut from the roster and has just come up and been a huge playmaker for us on this team. Speaking of playmakers, you can't say that without talking about Aaron Jones. So this is one that we had kind of known about last season, but arguably he has been the MVP of our team this year. Jones finished the 2019 regular season with 1,084 rushing yards, 16 rushing touchdowns on 236 rushing attempts. That's 103 more rushing attempts than he had last year. And like I said, that whole rushing to passing ratio has definitely changed year over year. He added an additional 474 receiving yards and another 3 receiving touchdowns. And when we're talking about some of these players, I didn't really do a whole category on what players need to step up and perform in order for the Packers to be successful. I think I'd save some of that stuff as I get to my final thoughts video next week. But Green Bay went 4-0 when he rushed for at least 100 yards, and they were 6-0 when he made his way into the end zone at least twice. In their 3 losses this season, Jones had 58 total yards, that's 21 rushing and 37 receiving, and 1 touchdown against Philadelphia. He had 29 total yards and 0 touchdowns against San Diego, and he had 38 rushing yards, no receiving yards, and 0 touchdowns against San Francisco. So if you want to talk about a trend, if you want to talk about a player that's got to make a difference and a player that has made a difference on this team all season long, it's definitely Aaron Jones. He is a huge reason that Rodgers hasn't had to put really the entire team on his back, and he will be the reason that the Packers keep moving the needle the right direction and keep heading deeper and deeper into the playoffs and hopefully playing in February. Oh, and by the way, in case you guys were unaware of this, that he is still only in the 3rd year of his rookie contract. He is making $645,000 this year, which in NFL terms is a pretty small amount. And I have a feeling that he will have himself a huge payday in the very near future. Speaking of somebody, though, who already had themselves a payday, let's talk about the guy on the defense, Za'Darius Smith. So Smith finished the season with 13.5 sacks. I always want to say 3.5 sacks. 13.5 sacks, which leads the team. It's actually 6th in the NFL. He had 55 tackles, and the only player in the NFL with at least 90 or more total quarterback pressures. He is one of only 3 players in NFL history to have 13 sacks, 35 QB hits, and 17 tackles for a loss. The other two players being J.J. Watt and Aaron Donald. Those guys are pretty decent football players. But shockingly, Za'Darius got no love this year. He was not voted to the Pro Bowl. He did not make the All-Pro team. But there is not another player, there is no other player on that Packers defense that makes an impact like Za'Darius does. When his motor is absolutely running and when he is going 100%, because he's not going to go, he just can't go 100% every single play, but when he's giving it 100%, he disrupts the offense, he creates opportunities for our secondary, and he creates momentum swings throughout that game just with his ability to get to the quarterback and just create chaos, quite frankly. If he can help bring, I'm going to go out on a limb here, if he can help bring Green Bay to another Super Bowl victory, I can confidently say that his name will be tossed in the hat or in the same sentences with Reggie White and Charles Woodson as some of the best free agent signings that we've ever had. That doesn't discredit Preston Smith, because I know he's had a great season. That doesn't really, I mean, I don't want to put him at that level yet, but with the way he's playing in his first season and the way that he can really just lead this team, I would put him in that conversation 100%. Speaking of, though, outside of the field or being off the field, Za'Darius has become one of the true leaders and voices in the locker room. He has respect of his peers. He has grown relationships with Rodgers, Preston Smith, and so many others, and his character as a person can't be taken for granted either. He has emerged as a player and a leader and a voice within that Packers locker room. Last but not least, on my players that have emerged list, I have to give some love to that offensive lineman. And that one that I'm talking about is Elgton Jenkins. So to quote Chris Collinsworth, here's a guy who took an opportunity and capitalized on it. So you can look at the other rookies that we drafted. You look at Darnell Savage, who was named a starter for week 1 and has performed admirably throughout his first year. You look at Rashawn Gary, who although hasn't played a lot of snaps, he's really turned it on the last couple of weeks, and I've seen improvement week over week with him. But since Jenkins was named the starting left guard in week 3, and that was because Lane Taylor went on the IR with a bicep injury, Jenkins has played in 100% of the snaps for the Green Bay Packers and on that offensive line. He hasn't missed a game. He hasn't missed a snap. Of those 571 pass blocking snaps, Jenkins has not allowed a single sack. Let that sink in, people. He has not allowed a sack as a pass blocker this entire season. That's a rookie that we're talking about. Jenkins finished with the highest grade among all rookie guards. He only allowed 22 quarterback pressures on the entire season. And although he has the luxury of playing next to a guy like All-Pro David Bakhtiari, Jenkins has been one of the best pass blockers, dare I say, in the entire league. For being the 44th overall pick in the second round of last year's draft, Jenkins has definitely emerged and will be a rock along that offensive line for many years and many years to come. So as far as players that maybe had a down year that I think will emerge in the playoffs, because we need to start looking forward, right? That's the next thing to talk about. I want to pick one offensive player and I want to talk about one defensive player. My offensive player that I think will emerge that had maybe a down year or an atrocious year, which is going to be the case with Jimmy Graham. That is a person that I put on my list that I think will step up with the next couple weeks ahead of us. I think he has to step up. I think the talent is there. I do think he has aged. He's having, if not his worst season of his career, he's having the second worst season of his career. He only has 38 receptions, 447 yards this year, 3 touchdowns. But he's going to be a huge, factor, and I can predict that he will be a huge factor for the Packers as the playoffs start to roll around the corner. We need some big weapon down the middle of the field. Yes, he struggled with drops. He hasn't been that red zone threat that we have wanted, but I see him making a play or 2 or 3 when we need him most, and I am going to take him as the player to emerge as the playoffs roll around. The other side of the football, though, this one I'm going to just take a real dark horse pick on this one because I like to be a little bit outside the box. I'm going to go with Raven Green as my player to emerge. Now, obviously, he had himself a down year because he went on the injured reserve in week 2 of that Minnesota Vikings game. He still hasn't officially been cleared to play by Matt LaFleur, so that's what makes this one a little bit of a dark horse. But all signs point to him making a return if he has a solid week of practice this upcoming week as we approach our divisional round matchup. Green excelled as a hybrid safety in Pettine's nickel sub package, and he's been holding that job since the start of OTAs last spring. So he really kind of didn't take him very long to get that role. He held on to it 100%, but when he went out, Green Bay had to slide Amos into the box next to Martinez, thus limiting the Packers' defensive looks. And Adrian Amos' primary skill is not to be slid down or play that hybrid safety role. So with him coming back, it gives them not only more options on the defensive side of the ball when it comes to play calling, but also puts a guy like Adrian Amos into his prime position and where he can make plays just as a true safety versus someone that's kind of flexed around a little bit. Green is a fast and hard hitter. He adds depth to that Packers defense, but he also adds depth to the special teams. I hope he can make a return. I think it'd be a big boost to this team in general if he can make a return. And I'm going to say I'll take him as my player to emerge in the playoffs if he does get healthy. So there you have it. I mean, I'm taking 2 huge shots in the dark because why not? That's what this stuff is all about, is Nostradamusing your way to crazy predictions. So Jimmy Graham, Raven Green, go out there and make me proud. So as we wrap up the video, again, a little bit sleep deprived, very early in the morning, because I wanted to post this and get it edited and whatnot before 8 o'clock this morning, hopefully when you guys start to watch this. But let's talk about my confidence level heading in the playoffs, because we don't know who we're going to face yet. We will find that out by the end of the day, or if you are watching this at night, we will already know who we are going to play. My gut's telling me the Saints are who we're going to play, but maybe the Minnesota Vikings will show up. Maybe Dalvin Cook will be 100% healthy. He'll finish the game, and they will put on an entire upset of the New Orleans Saints. But I'm confident. I'm very confident with this team, and it's not just because I have a Packers podcast show and I surround myself with Packers memorabilia and clothing and live, breathe, and eat Packers like the rest of you. But we talk about the brotherhood on this team. It's something that we haven't seen in many, many years. It's one of those big X factors that completely gets forgotten about. You can have so much talent on your team, but if they don't play for each other, if they don't work for each other and all that, they don't give it everything they got, that's something that can hurt a team. That's a huge piece to this Packers puzzle that I absolutely love. We talk about adversity. Like I said before, they've gone through a multitude of different games this season where they played with leads, they played from behind, they've gutted it out, they've just completely clicked. They found ways to win. 13-3 is not an easy record to come by any stretch of the imagination, but the Packers managed to find themselves at that point and get themselves a first-round bye and put themselves in this position. A win is a win, and we only need, again, 2 more wins to find ourselves in the Super Bowl. So I really like what this team is looking like. I love the outlook, and I love I confidently can say that we have a shot at any of these games and matchups against any of these teams. Yes, some of these teams like San Francisco have just looked star-studded and powerful throughout the entire year, and the Saints are looking extremely hot coming off of the last couple of weeks of the season and coming into the playoffs hot. So Green Bay I think they're gonna be fine. I love the fact that they have home field advantage for at least one game is gonna be huge, and I think if Seattle win Seattle, that's my prediction on that game, Seattle should beat Philadelphia. If Seattle goes over and faces San Francisco, Seattle has won in San Francisco before, and I wouldn't be surprised if Seattle is able to upset them, and then Seattle comes to Green Bay to wrap up the NFC Championship game. And I love the Packers' odds against really any of these teams at home. If they would have got that first seed, it would have been a really nice kind of walk. Maybe not walk's the right word, but I think they would have had a much easier path. But I think all that stuff can kind of work itself out. So there's my predictions as far as today's games. I'll take the Saints, and I will take the Seahawks. No major upsets, no surprises. I think they're going to be good football games. But yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to go. I think that's where I wanted to go with this video. Again, super sleep deprived. I'm going to put this video together. I'm going to edit this video. I'm going to try to get myself a little bit of a cat nap in at some point this morning. Before we watch some more playoff football throughout the day. But let me know down below what maybe some of your highlights were of the 2019 season. Let me know what your thoughts are on the matchups that are around the corner. If we already know who we're facing by the time you're watching this, let me know how you think they're going to line up. I will go live tomorrow night. That is Monday, January 6th at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. We will know our opponent so we can discuss some of that stuff and what we'll have to do to win that game. And there's always Packers news to talk about 100% of the way. So thank you guys for checking out this video. Thank you. If you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Hit that like button. It means the world. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the season, and that only gives me about 3 more weeks here because you know we're going. We're going. It's gonna happen, right? It's gotta happen. And then if you do subscribe, I'll give away this tapestry. But now I'm just rambling. Until next time, folks, I will see you on the internet. Thanks for watching.